Welcome back to the sanctuary where the gloss of fame is gently stripped away to reveal the pulses underneath. You are watching Turkish series stars, the corner of the internet where we trade polish for presence and whisper level truths for what they are, the heartbeat behind the headlines. Tonight we aren't tallying ratings, measuring red carpet shine, or reciting press releases. Tonight, we are stepping into a narrative as breakable as glass and as heavy as memory. A story about fatherhood under pressure, the ache of uncertainty, and a quiet loyalty that chooses presence over performance. We are talking about Baris Arduç, and the private storm that has turned his days into a slow-motion test of strength, and about the unexpected steadiness appearing in the form of Elcin Sangu. Before we move forward, anchor yourself to our community. Subscribe to Turkish series stars, click like to honor the tenderness of what we're about to discuss. And if you believe in respectful storytelling driven by empathy, press the join button to help us keep the lights warm and the voices human. Now take a breath with us as we walk into the kind of silence that swallows applause, where a father wrestles with the possibility of having less time to be what he loves being most. In a world of dazzling premieres and carefully curated images, a different kind of murmur has begun to thread itself through backlit corridors and the hushed tables of Istanbul's coffee culture. These murmurs don't tally new roles or celebrate box office records. They circle around a single truth whispered with caution. Baris, they say, is facing a passage more harrowing than any scripted conflict. Sources who speak softly, and only when asked, suggest he is navigating a legal maze that tugs at the most protected parts of his heart. This isn't the ordinary throb of celebrity turbulence. This is a test that reaches into the quiet spaces where identity and fatherhood meet, under the cool gaze of a court that must put a child's best interests above every other beat. What is being said, through lips careful with kindness and prudence, is that a formal request has been placed before the court, revisiting the terms that decide when and how a father and child share their days. To the outsider, that might look like paperwork on a desk. To a parent, it is an earthquake that moves in centimeters and aftershocks. Nothing is final. No verdict has inked itself onto paper. Yet the air feels tight around him, as if every minute weighs more than it did yesterday. Friends note that his routine, once threaded with the small, ordinary joys that stitch life together, has been sliced into long hours of waiting rooms, signatures that don't feel like ink so much as breath being counted, and nights that refuse to loosen their grip. Imagine that dread, the fear that the messy happiness of breakfast chatter might be rationed, that the easy rituals of midweek jokes and weekend plans could be carved thinner by a sentence read under fluorescent light. Those mornings when shoes are found under sofas, when laughter is louder than the kettle, what happens when the law redraws the map of those moments? Fewer Sundays. Narrower corridors of time. It's the kind of worry that sits on the chest and waits, and waits, and waits. And just as the past clangs against the present, another name returns to the frame with a calm, unshowy light, Elcin Sangu. There was a time when the book of Baris and Elcin seemed to be shelved among stories that once were, their pages closed without bitterness, their paths bending forward in separate arcs. Work continued. Goals adjusted. Life gathered itself and moved on. But as the waters around Baris began to churn, something shifted, not a spectacle, not a plotted reunion, just a quiet current that carried a message of care across the distance. Those who hover near the edges say it started softly. A message that landed at the right hour, a voice note that lingered after the words ran out, a phone call that didn't need explanations so much as breath and shared silence. No cryptic posts. No declarations meant to set the internet aflame. No orchestration of public sympathy. Just presence, the line held open, the ear that listens more than it speaks, the steadiness that doesn't announce itself. She didn't perform care. She practiced it. And in rooms with no cameras, at tables where the napkins are folded and the phones are face down, they say she created a space where his shoulders could drop and his voice could exist without armor. Is it romance returning from ash, or is it the alchemy of a great partnership evolving into something gentler and more resilient? Perhaps it is neither monolith nor label, just the honest shape that affection takes when life demands more from us than a headline can hold. What those near him describe is a man who guards his private world with intention, who loves his child with a devotion that doesn't need to be declared to be seen. And in the echo between court dates, he has reportedly named one lifeline as priceless, the measured calm of Elcin's support, the kind that puts air back into the room. Pause with us here. In an age where former collaborators and old flames can turn the public square into a coliseum, the quiet dignity of this solidarity surprises precisely because it refuses to be a show. What do you think? Can great love grow into a friendship that doesn't flinch? Or are loyalties like this rare relics that survive only in the gentlest hearts? Tell us in the comments. And if you value conversations that handle fragile truths with care, remember that the join button keeps Turkish series stars able to hold the camera steady when the story trembles. Make no mistake, there are no grand gestures parading through flashbulbs here. No choreographed strolls calibrated for the algorithm. What exists feels smaller, and because of that, more sacred. Check-ins that ask nothing, conversations that don't try to solve the unsolvable, moments that protect more than they reveal. Private meetings are said to happen in corners chosen not for secrecy's thrill but for mercy, the mercy of privacy that lets two people be as ordinary as they need to be. Strip away the myth and the glamour and you are left with two human beings giving each other careful attention, the kind that keeps a person from slipping beneath the surface. So where does this lead? The cynics say that proximity born of crisis fades with the crisis itself, that once the papers are filed and stamped, the knots loosen and the closeness dissolves. The romantics counter that fire refines what it cannot destroy, that bonds tempered by hardship don't break, they change shape and come back stronger. And Elcin's refusal to narrate this into the public ear only deepens the intrigue. Her quiet feels deliberate, a boundary drawn not to tease, but to keep the focus where it belongs. On the child at the center and the father waiting for clarity without losing himself. The online debates hum, alive with interpretations and wishes and warnings. Some say this is adulthood at its finest, a lesson in how affection can survive the end of a chapter and become something grateful and grounded. Others feel a pulse beneath the words, suggesting that if the calls stretch past midnight and the silences are comfortable, then perhaps the first spark never entirely went out. Whatever the truth, it is undeniable that the names Baris Arduç and Elcin Sangu are being spoken together again, and not because of a premiere calendar or a joint press tour, but because real life insisted. Friends say Baris has turned inward, trading clamor for stillness, red carpets for quiet tables, strategies scribbled between sips of bitter coffee. Dawn can be unkind in times like these, arriving too early with too much thought. There are moments, they hint, when he stares at an imagined calendar, counting days that might be counted by someone else, afraid of how quickly weeks can snap shut. In that tilting room, the presence of a person who remembers the version of him that comes out only when the applause is gone is not a luxury. It's a rope through a window, the kind you grip without needing to know how high you are above the ground. On the other side of the silence, the ex-wife at the heart of this legal reconsideration has nothing to say publicly, and perhaps that is grace too. Family law is a slow ship in still water, and statements rarely make good companions to patience. The court's pace is its own, unhurried and exacting. Each delay gathers suspense. Each unanswered question grows louder in the vacuum. When the decision arrives, it will redraw the map not only for Baris, but for everyone who holds space for the child at the center of this fragile constellation. What can be said is this: the solidarity shown by Elcin resists easy naming. It doesn't posture. It protects. It doesn't chase a spotlight. It holds a door. It reminds us that in a world addicted to spectacle, the quiet things do the lasting work, small reassurances, a message that says I'm here, a promise that doesn't need a caption. For now, both of them keep their dignity wrapped close, their voices low. Cameras scan for clues. Fans parse gestures. And all of us wait, like an audience listening for a gavel we cannot see. In the end, This is not only a story about two luminous stars who once set a screen on fire. It is the story of a human spirit refusing to be defined by fear of loss. It is about showing up when it would be easier to perform. It is about how loyalty whispers and how those whispers, repeated, can become strong enough to hold a person together through a season of not knowing. The rumor mills grind. The tea leaves arrange themselves in shifting patterns. A detail may surface tomorrow, or next week, or not at all. But for Baris and for Elcin, the only audience that matters is the one they meet in the mirror, and the only critic worth hearing is the small voice of conscience that asks, "Did you do right by what is fragile?" We will keep watch, not to pounce, but to witness. If your heart was moved by this quiet chapter, subscribe to Turkish series stars, click like, tap the bell so you don't miss what comes next, and consider pressing join to make sure this space remains one where care outweighs clamor. Until next time, take care of your people. Hold close what is tender. And remember, true loyalty doesn't need to shout to be heard. This has been a special presentation by Turkish series stars. Goodbye, and may gentleness meet you where you need it most.